George Rydlinski hails from the Chicago area. He was drawn to music through his local high school band. He pursued a Bachelor of Music in Bassoon Performance from Northern Illinois University. And after freelancing in and around Chicago, he joined the Army in 1983 and served as bassoonist with a number of Army bands. He retired from that in 2004, both from active duty and from the 9th Army Band at Fort Wainwright. He immediately went to work with the Fairbanks Symphony Orchestra office as a market manager, a position he held until his second retirement. You're getting good at this, I'll bet you. In 1922. In 1996, he joined the Fairbanks Symphony Orchestra and the Arctic Chamber Orchestra as principal bassoonist. George has been an adjunct faculty member at UAF and was the music director of the Fairbanks Youth Symphony from 2006 through 2017. George has been active with Flott, both as a pit musician and a musical director for many Flott performances, Fiddler on the Roof being the most recent example of that. Although George is officially retired, yeah, right, he continues to perform with his bassoon and baton. He resides with his wife Candy of over 40 years in North Pole. Please welcome George Rydlinski. Now, you say you grew up in Chicagoland, which is, I guess, the greater Chicago area. And what are some of your earliest memories?
I think, has anybody ever seen the TV show The Wonder Years?
Yeah.
That's how I view my childhood. It was very similar to that in growing up in. Well, I was born in Chicago and lived on the south side until maybe I was 8 years old, and then we moved out to the suburbs. And I was just playing baseball all the time. Our beautiful long summers. Mm-hmm. So we were always out of the house, and I just have such fond memories. It's you can't do that today, I think.
Well, it's harder, I think. Yeah.
But the kids were just left to their own devices. Neighborhood kids, and we'd play baseball in the streets. We'd play baseball in the little sand lots that are a few blocks away. It was just a charmed life. I had no responsibilities, as a kid. I tried to be a good student at school, but I wasn't anything special.
Yeah.
But I really remember baseball.
Well, how about those Cubs? Did you go to games as a boy?
I did. We had a nice park district program in the summers, and they would get a bunch of tickets for the young people, and they'd bus us down.
Yeah.
And so I got to see quite a few games.
How about the Bears?
Bears, I've only seen, well, actually, I've never been to a Bears game, but I've been to Soldier Field. And it was in August, before Walter Payton became a pro. I think they were playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, how they'd play with a pro team and all the college all-stars type thing. So I got to see Walter Payton in his early days.
Do you still follow him?
Yeah, I'm a Bears and Cubs fan.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about the new rookie quarterback that they got, the number 1 pick, Caleb Williams. So watch out for those Bears this year.
That's real loyalty. Okay, I want to, because music has been such an integral part of your life, what was on the turntable or the radio when you were growing up in your parents' place?
Well, my parents both watched and liked Lawrence Welk, as many of that generation did. My mom had, I think, a secret crush on Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. And they liked ballet. So they would go to ballet things, but we didn't have too many records in the home.
Sure.
So what was on the radio was, just
So the
pop stuff of the day.
Yeah.
My sister is 3 years older, and she was a big Beatles fan and all that kind of stuff. So I learned a lot of music through her.
Okay.
She was an influence to me, and the pop genre.
Well, we exchanged some emails and talked a little bit, and you fell in love with classical music through your high school band.
It was during the band years, in high school.
Tell me about that.
Well, first of all, if I may.
You may.
I started in 5th grade on clarinet. And not so enthusiastically. My sister had started clarinet, and then she dropped it after a year or two. And then it came to be my turn. I said, okay, why not? So I was a good son and didn't want to let an instrument go to waste, so I started it. But I wasn't into it.
Okay.
Like I was into baseball.
Yeah.
But I stuck with it all the way through middle school, and then in high school, at the end of my freshman year, I was in the lower band, the first year. I auditioned for the next band, and I made it, but they asked me to play, because I wasn't very good, but they asked me to play contrabass clarinet, which is like a kitchen sink device. It's an octave lower than a bass clarinet.
Okay.
And I said, sure. And I enjoyed that for a year, and it was that year, towards the end of my sophomore year, one of my band teachers played some excerpts of bassoon music from orchestral parts or pieces. And I remember hearing the Berlioz Symphonie Fantastique.
Oh, sure.
And the last movement, there's this 4 bassoons just knocking out this riff. It sounds like insects or something.
Yeah.
I said, ooh, that sounds kind of cool. So, and the reason he played that was because the current bassoonist in the band was graduating that year. So they talked me into taking the bassoon home for the summer, see what you can do with it. So I learned the basic fingerings and started in my junior year playing the bassoon.
Okay, I have a couple of questions if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right, both clarinet and bassoon, reed instruments.
Right.
I hear they can be a tad finicky.
Yeah. At that level, not so much. But when you get into playing orchestras and the older you get, your standards get higher, and you're always in search of the perfect reed that can do everything, which is an impossibility.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that a little bit later too.
Okay.
If we have time.
Yeah.
But reeds are, as my wife can tell you, a pain in the ass.
Well, that's what I understood. I was just saying finicky, but I've heard that they can be temperamental. Well, okay, and then the fingering. You mentioned you had to relearn the fingering. Is there sort of a basic fingering for woodwinds that allowed you to adapt pretty easily to it?
Yeah, there's a basic similarity. For example, on the clarinet, the left hand, right hand in the lower octave is very similar to the left hand, right hand fingerings on the bassoon. Once you get up past that first octave, though, then things get crazy.
Yeah. All right, we can go to that in a little bit later. But I do also want to ask, he played you a series of musical pieces. And I always have to ask somebody who's specialized in something, not whether they have a special piece that they've enjoyed performing, but is there a composer that you thought really understood the instrument and that sort of you enjoy whenever you get a chance to play?
There's quite a few.
Yeah.
Not just one.
Yeah.
I enjoy playing Mozart very much.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy Beethoven very much. Tchaikovsky wrote some beautiful solos for the bassoon in his symphonies. And Shostakovich, another great symphonist. Stravinsky, a lot of Russian composers knew how to write for bassoon very well.
Yeah.
Rimsky-Korsakov in his Scheherazade, as you know, feature the bassoon. Actually, it features the whole orchestra. I mean, it's a great piece. It's like a concerto for orchestra. I mean, every soloist and every first chair player has a solo of some sort in that piece. So it's wonderful.
Well, all right. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you go then and study as a bassoonist in college. So I'm wondering, that matriculation, what did that give you? What does that provide you? Are you grounded in music theory, or what's going on there, George?
All right, well, let me tell you, starting bassoon as a junior in high school, I was way behind everybody else. Oh. So when it came time I graduated, and I kept loving music more and more. And so I went in as an undeclared major, but I still played bassoon. And my first university, well, it wasn't a university, it was a college. I went 2 years before I went to Northern Illinois at Augustana College. Again, because my sister was there. She was at that school, and Illinois had a state scholarship program. So I went to school for free, pretty much.
Wow. That's wonderful.
So, not on a bassoon scholarship at Augustana, but a state scholarship. So, I almost flunked freshman theory because I had no theory. I didn't know what.
Yeah.
I don't know why I became a music major. I was woefully unprepared. I had no piano skills or anything. I didn't play piano or anything like that. So harmony and chords and this and that was alien to me. So, but after that first quarter at Augustana, people helped me, and I kept with it, and then I fully declared that I was going to be a music major. In my junior year, I transferred to Northern Illinois University, where I got to study with a really, really fine teacher, Jim Birkenstock. He was with the Lyric Opera of Chicago for many years. He's retired now, but I think he was there for at least 35, maybe 45 years as a principal bassoonist. And the funny thing is, my first experience with opera was Richard Strauss's Salome, which is not a pretty opera at all, but the music excited me so much. And I got to see the Lyric perform it, and it just blew me away. And also, back in high school, I got to hear the Chicago Symphony many, many times. In my first concert, the first piece on the program was Bartók's Suite from the Miraculous Mandarin. I don't know if anybody knows that one, but it just totally blew me away. How can these people on stage produce that sound?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And the unity of sound.
Yeah.
It was quite remarkable. And so Anyway, where were we?
You know, just hearing you, I just want to underscore, you know, when I was fishing around as an undergraduate what to major in, my advisor said, if that's what you love to do, if that is something you think I cannot not do it, follow that. Yeah. You know, Joseph Campbell, that follow your bliss kind of deal. But it's so funny that when you fall in love and have that passion for something like music, you know, the theory, that'll come. But it's that line of enthusiasm, of passion, that runs through it. You know, you mentioned your teacher. I'm always interested in who mentor, you know, my guests. And what was your teacher like that you responded to it? And did you incorporate that when you were leading young people? Did you learn or see something in that tutelage?
Yeah, I think he was tough, high standards, and he, more than anybody else, he was the one that taught me how to listen. Not just to what I'm playing, but to those around me, and how music fits, like, you know, meshes. It's not all about one person, just, you know, soloist type thing. I mean, there are pieces like that, obviously, but concertos. But playing as a woodwind player in an orchestra, you have to know your place and your part, when to come out, when to blend, all that kind of stuff. And that has stayed with me all these years and throughout my career. And it's been especially gratifying to use that and when working with young people. So with a young youth orchestra or college band.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a second.
Sure.
So you graduate and you freelance for a while in Chicago, and then you joined the Army.
Yes.
And were you expecting to be in the Army band when you signed up?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It was. I went in specifically with that intent. In fact, well, it was at a Midwest band conference that they have every year in Chicago in December that I went, just to see what's happening in the world. And they had all these. They had the Air Force band there, and the Army band had a contingent of recruiters there. So I got wooed and recruited by the Army.
Sure.
And that was in December. I took the test in late December, and then had all the other stuff, physical stuff, in January, and an audition at Fort Sheridan, which is just north of Chicago. They had a band there, and that's what I had hoped to get into, but there was no opening. So I was going to go to Indianapolis, Fort Ben Harrison. But anyway, I went to basic training.
Okay, I got to stop you there.
Okay.
Because if you're a musician and you're in basic training, no, not the hands. I can't do that. These hands are a gift. You know, how does that work for a musician?
You just grin and bear it. You do what you got to do, right?
Okay. They don't cut musicians any slack then.
I was told, you know, don't even tell them you're a musician.
Okay.
Because they'll pick on you.
Yeah. All right. There you go.
But anyway, after we did all the basic training stuff, you know, shooting the weapon and carrying a rucksack with 30 pounds in it for, you know, 20 miles. So I was in good shape by the time I got out of basic training. And then I was shipped to the Armed Forces School of Music in Norfolk, Virginia. Oh, wow. It's between Norfolk and Virginia Beach. It's on a Navy base. So we shared, our classmates were Navy musicians and Marine musicians.
Oh.
Air Force does their own thing.
Oh, yeah. So, but you didn't get any fights because you were in the different branch.
no.
Okay.
We're all musicians, so,
Yeah.
and we would, we have classes, and we'd all be interspersed. It's, so it wasn't just Army, but we would have classes, which was now a snap for me in theory and stuff because I had my degree. They teach us how to march, Army style, with your instruments, and then we'd also have concert band rehearsals, and that's where I met my lovely wife. And then
Yeah, she was in the service too?
Yes, she was
Okay.
an oboe player in the Army band.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and she was ahead of me in the school. They'd start a class every month or so, and she was at her halfway point when I had just got there. And so we kind of had our first date at the end of June, was it? And I asked her to marry me 6 weeks later, and then,
Holy moly.
and then 4 weeks later we were married. So it's not like we had to get married,
Yeah.
but we did have to get married because she was being sent to Germany, and I was going to go to Indianapolis, Fort Ben Harrison. So they said, 'cause we were going to possibly get married around Christmas time so that family could be involved. But no. Our teachers and mentors advised us, if you guys want to be stationed together in the next 2-3 years, you should get married now. So we did. We got married at Justice of the Peace, and then she graduated, and she helped me accelerate out. And then she went to Germany first, and then about a month later, I followed.
Okay.
And luckily got to the same band. Because the Army didn't know we were married, sort of, yet. I mean, they did, but the people in D.C.
The paperwork was there, but
right?
the
Yeah.
didn't. Yeah. Okay.
So, but anyway, luckily it all worked out, and so we had a 2-year honeymoon in Europe.
Well, that sounds lovely. Yeah. Congratulations, Mazel tov. But I do want to ask about bands in the Army, because we all have known and heard Army bands, but I didn't realize how many there were. Will every installation try to have their own band, or how is that done?
There were a lot more bands when we came in, and they were starting to draw down from the Vietnam era, and there were many more bands at that time, and many more personnel in each band.
Okay.
But as we came in, things were drawing down, and there's 3 tiers of bands: the major, special bands, like in DC, all the DC bands. There's 4 of them there, and then there's the one at West Point. I'm talking Army. Then there's major command bands like FORSCOM and TRADOC, and then the rest are what they call line bands. They're either division, they go wherever the soldiers go, like there were many bands in Vietnam. And then there's other bands that are post bands, and they do graduation ceremonies and things like that, and community relations kind of things. So we were in Germany, we were in a touring band, and our area of performances spanned southern Germany, France, Belgium, Holland,
Wow.
and England.
Wow.
So we would do a yearly tour to England,
Wow.
a 2-week tour usually, and they weren't all, concerts in concert halls. Mostly they were fests and parades and things like that we would play at. But One thing, when I first got to my first unit in Germany, an older sergeant first class sat me down, because he knew I'd been a college grad and this and that. And he says, so just get one thing straight. We're not in the concert business, we're in the entertainment business.
Oh, interesting.
And I always thought, at first I thought, what did I get myself into? But it's true. After spending 2 years in Germany, it was a really important mission for the Army to make the local communities happy. And the band was the big...
I bet you a big draw.
Big draw and a big face of the Army.
Sure.
You know, a positive spin, putting a positive spin on it.
Yeah.
Because Lord knows there were plenty of accidents and training mishaps.
Yeah, of course.
So, but yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
What a great place to honeymoon, too.
Yeah. We saw some wonderful sights. And
now, do you mind if I just follow up with a couple of questions here, George, in the sense that, you know, I mean, France, Germany, this is where classical music really matured and flowered. Yeah. Where the audience is, you know, like, all right, give us your best shot, you know. How were the audiences in Europe as opposed to anywhere else you went?
Well, they really like music, you know.
Yeah.
And they like all kinds of music. And we would give them all kinds of music. They especially loved jazz.
Really?
American jazz. They liked Elvis. So we did some Elvis things. They just liked American music, but they also, of course, they grow up with Beethoven and Mozart and Brahms and Wagner and all this stuff. And so they have a keen sense of appreciation for that, for those things.
I bet.
I think more so than in the United States in general. You know, the urban areas have their arts, cultural centers and institutions. But well, of course, Germany is much smaller than the United States. But I think per capita, they all have a better understanding of classical music.
Sure. Yeah. And another question I had, because we're getting back to those pesky reeds now. You've talked about various climates, for example, Vietnam, which could be a very hot, humid climate, and then Germany, I imagine, you know, has wet periods, but I think of it as more cold and northern. Did you have to care for your instrument in unique ways wherever you were deployed?
Yeah, we still do, yeah. Every season is different, you know. If the place, the venue has the heat cranked up, then things get dry, you know.
Sure.
So you always have to tweak. You have to have a good number of reeds in your reed case. So if one's not acting right, well, maybe number 2 will work today. So you have to have
Are they a consistent material? As do they use, you know, the same wood or the same element if it's synthetic?
It's grown from a wild cane that actually grows in many places now, but traditionally was Italy and France along the Mediterranean coast there. But now there's places in South America that grow beautiful cane. In Mexico and other places around the world. But it's Arundo donax. It's a weed that it looks like bamboo. And there's so, you know, it's so complicated, but they split the cane into 3 pieces, and depending on, you know, for oboe it's much smaller, and bassoon's a little bit wider, and you get, it's too complicated to really talk about. But yes, they're all reed instruments are made from this material.
Okay.
So clarinet reeds. The difference between that and saxophone, or that and bassoon, is the clarinet has a single reed, and the bassoons and oboes have a double reed that vibrate against each other.
Ooh.
So.
Twice the challenge?
Yeah, you have to get both sides to be mirror images of themselves, and it's, you know, when you're working on a dead vegetable, it's sometimes these dead vegetables keep growing on one side and the other side not.
Yeah.
So, you know, they warp and things like that. So.
Okay, one last question. This is the nerd in me, George, so forgive me. But, you
We're
know,
all nerds.
violinist, Stradivarius, of course, Guarneri, these are names for violins. Is there a similar bassoon maker that people say, well, that's the gold standard?
Yeah, for bassoon, first of all, there's two major schools of bassoon playing, French and the German. Mm. I play the German, which is what the Americans play. And the top make company is Heckel, Wilhelm Heckel Company. And they're just outside of Frankfurt, and they've been there for over 100 years making bassoons. And that's the instrument I play on.
Oh, nice.
From 1926.
Woo. You know, when you say that, I think, oh, that was a good year.
Yes.
You know,
it was a good vintage.
The 27, yeah, anyway. Okay, let's get you back to the Army and moving around. Now, the other, I assume you came up to Fairbanks at a posting at Fort Wainwright.
Yes, that's when we came to Fairbanks the first time, but we were brought to Alaska down in Anchorage at Fort Richardson first.
Oh, okay.
The band was down there, and we came up in January of '89. Remember that brutal year?
Yeah.
the,
Timing is everything.
Yeah. That was our first breath of fresh air. When we got off the plane, everything froze. And this was in Anchorage. It was 35 below. That was pretty cold for them.
Yeah.
And while we were down there just getting settled into Fort Richardson, the band that was there was up here at Eielson Air Force Base, and that's when that Canadian C-130 crashed at Wainwright. Do you remember
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
And they used the band instrument van as a kind of a hearse or whatever vehicle to remove the dead people from that accident, terrible accident.
Yeah.
But anyway, I started down there, and a year and a half later, the general moved his headquarters up to Fort Wainwright, and that's when the band moved up too. And that's when we first kind of got to know Fairbanks, and we kind of fell in love with it.
Nice.
So.
And then you requested to come back, or you just stayed and then?
Well, they moved me to one of those major command bands in '92, or January, February '92, to back to Virginia, across from where we had met at the School of Music, Fort Monroe. You may have heard of it, Fortress Monroe.
I think.
It was established in 1609. Before it
Oh,
was a
that
country.
one. Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Everybody knows that one.
So it's a lovely, lovely area on the Chesapeake Bay there. We had housing there that looked right. There's a boardwalk, a little beach in the
Wow.
Chesapeake Bay. So
Oh,
it
that's sweet.
it was a beautiful, beautiful assignment there.
Yeah.
But that was the highest musical experience for me in the Army, because they were all top-notch players. You had to play at a certain level to be in that band.
Yeah.
And so basically they all had college degrees, music majors.
Yeah.
So.
Well, when you work under the baton, various batons at each of the Army, you must see a lot of different approaches, different styles to conduct or interpreting the music. You must learn a little flexibility, or how does that work, do you think?
Yeah, it's amazing how every conductor is different.
Yeah.
It could be because of their body shape, how tall, how short they are, how high they have to bring their arms, you know, when you're out in the field and you have to conduct, you know, outside, you know, formation. So I've had some great conductors, and I've had some not so great conductors.
Not so great.
They were good musicians, but
Yeah.
they were not stick technicians, you know? So it's been fascinating. You know, everybody had something good to offer.
Well, I'm going to get to that in just a minute. But I think when you got here to Fairbanks, did it strike you and Candy that, you know, for a town our size, we have a remarkable selection of great bands here? Of course, the symphony orchestra, chamber orchestra,
Right.
and there's, you know, the performers who do community band, et cetera, et cetera. It's just such a rich environment for a town this size. Is that how it struck you?
Yes, immediately. Thank goodness the university is here and had a thriving music department and the Fairbanks Symphony and Arctic Chamber Orchestra, as you say. And Candy actually got to play with them on our first tour when was that? Fall of '91, she went on a tour with the chamber orchestra and did all the Brandenburg concertos. And they went out to the Aleutians. I couldn't get away with the Army, but she had that opportunity. And then when we came back 5 years later, in January of '96, we tried to get involved with the music scene as much as possible right away. Things were familiar. We had been here before. So we rented a house out in North Pole at first, and then a couple of years later we ended up buying it because we thought we could work it out where we could retire here, or if not, we could go one more assignment and then come back and retire here. But that's what we wanted to do because of the opportunities that were available to us. Sure. We have a special set of skills that's not very common.
Yeah.
Well,
a lot of places probably have, you know, symphony orchestras or chamber orchestras.
Right, and double reed players are always at a premium. You know, clarinets, trumpets, flutes, they're a dime a dozen, but very well, it's the truth. Go to any band, you'll see. Do you have a bassoon? No. Do you have an oboe player? No. We've got lots of other players, but so it was just a match
for us. Wait a minute.
So
if Candy was a trumpet player, do you
I
think
wouldn't know.
No, it wouldn't. Okay. Gotcha.
I should tell you a story. What endeared me to her, we would sit next. This is back at the Armed Forces School of Music. We would be in rehearsal, and my bassoon comes off this side and sticks out that way. But at the bottom, there's all these keys that I can't really see while I'm playing. And she would sit next to me, and she would mess with the keys so the bassoon wouldn't work. So that's how we how we fell in love.
Not off key in that regard then, right? Okay, so you're in Fairbanks here and you become market manager for the symphony orchestra as soon as you retire from the Army.
Yeah, they were looking to expand the office and do other things, and I don't think it was called marketing at that time, but they just wanted to get the orchestra more public.
Yeah, elevate its profile.
Yeah. And do more things like that. And I got out in 2004. I tried to climb Denali, didn't make it, but
Oh, wait,
I spent
wait a minute.
I spent a
So got it. You didn't tell me this story.
yeah, well, because I failed.
With the bassoon or
no,
not?
no,
Okay.
no. Some of the younger guys talked me into it. They were going to do an expedition, and they said, "This is a nice split from the Army into civilian life." So I said, "All right." So anyway, I got up to, I don't know, about 8,000 feet, which is not much.
Yeah,
Because
you
you
say
get
so.
you get a ride to 7,000 feet
Yeah.
from the airplane. But I hurt my back,
Yeah.
and so I decided to stay on Kahiltna Glacier while they went up. So I was kind of alone for 10 days while they were trying to get up there. They didn't make it either. They got turned away by weather. But they they dubbed it, what was it, in Georgetown?
Where you were?
Where I was
at the
camping.
base camp.
Yeah. They called it Georgetown. So, and people would go by, up and down, up and down. One time, a crew from South America, I don't know if it's Chile, fell into a crevasse. Thankfully, not deeply, and they were all tied up. But I was watching them while they were getting him out. So I mean, it was, I didn't stray very far from my little area. But I had built it up nice,
Yeah, that's right. Subletted. And,
Yeah.
Like boardwalk or
Yeah.
something like. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you join the Fairbanks Symphony Orchestra,
Working in the office, yeah.
working in the office, but you're also principal bassoonist.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask a couple of questions about that. As you know, I always think of like Hogwarts or something. The first chair is like, demerit, that was a wrong note. We're marking you down, So what are the responsibilities that a first chair offers their section?
Well, hopefully they know their part, and they know the other person's part, how to help them. Sometimes it's just a matter of fingerings, alternate fingerings. They'll make something darker or something brighter or something to blend.
Yeah.
But I think the most that a principal player can do is always be prepared.
Sure.
Don't learn your part during rehearsal. Know it ahead of time so that the rehearsal can be used to put everything together.
Right.
So, and that's been my modus operandi.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, do you think in a funny way when you eventually take up the baton yourself with the Youth Symphony Orchestra, that kind of leadership position helped prepare you? Was it watching others? Do you know what I'm saying? As a conductor, you've got, everybody you got to kind of corral.
Right. It's intimidating. And my first conducting experiences were in college. I had to take a conducting class, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But then I didn't get a chance to do it until I got to my second Army duty station at Fort Sheridan and went back to Chicago.
Oh.
And my band director there, Denny Stone, allowed me to be like a rehearsal conductor. And I gained a lot of experience there with that. So, and then throughout the rest of my military career, I did get quite a bit of conducting, either in rehearsal or on ceremonies.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's probably everybody who loves classical music in their living room is a conductor, you know? And
Air
they all
conductor.
respond so well, There's nothing wrong on that. But I'm sure it can be both, as you were saying, challenging, but also there must be such a a powerful rush that comes when everybody is in concert, is playing harmoniously, or
Yeah.
and it just comes together.
Right. It's a great feeling,
Yeah.
and especially with young people. I try to be very clear, pretty much vanilla, starting out, so they don't necessarily have to count, and they can concentrate on the notes and making the music line. Then we can get expressive later, But the most important thing to me always has been playing together with one sense, one vision, and as a conductor, you get to make that vision, or you get to use your vision.
I would imagine so. And you said earlier, it's not just one person, but I think so often when a kid will grow up, they're practicing on that. They go to their teacher corrects them or, shapes them. They're so used to. So when you come as a young person, I would guess, into this group setting, suddenly all that individuality has to bend to that unified kind of vision that the conductor leads.
Yeah, and it's the hardest thing, I think, for many young musicians. A lot of them think, boy, I'm pretty good, and I should be the leader.
Yeah.
But sometimes, they have to know when to hold them and when to fold them, kind of thing.
Well, we're going to talk about listening. This will tell you the level of my culture, but there's a great line in Ghostbusters where the female lead, Sigourney Weaver, is part of a symphony orchestra, and he said, "You were the best in your row," when he witnesses thing. But that goes to the idea of listening. And George, do you have to listen in a way as a conductor that you didn't as just an orchestra member?
It's very similar. It's just you have to do more.
Yeah.
Listen to more things that you normally wouldn't listen to, maybe the percussion or something like that.
Right.
But yeah.
And
The biggest thing, Robert, is conductors have to have a full score, and they have to really know it before you step on the podium, because musicians will know if you're a phony or not in 10 seconds or less. So if you're just beating time,
that won't cut it. Yeah.
that won't cut it. So
Yeah. Do you, when you study your score, because really it's a blank slate in many ways. You can emphasize certain voices, I would guess, or draw forward or push forward in a way. So what do you look for in, is every piece different for you, George, when you sit down to look at it?
there's a lot of pieces that are similar, but in general, every piece is different.
Yeah.
And then every orchestra that you work with or band that you work with, depending on their strength of numbers, maybe you have a weak number of strings and more brass, and so you have to balance these things.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. But it's a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I want to turn, if we can, and talk about Flott in this respect, because just as you're listening to the musicians around you in a symphony, suddenly you have actors, singers, you have all sorts of new elements. Talk to me about being a musician in that context.
Yeah. As a player in the pit, It's relatively straightforward and pretty easy. You can't really tell, you can't hear what's going on stage. You have to rely on the conductor. That's
Right.
why they're so important. And the other problem with the pit musician, being a pit musician, is you, you don't get the music in advance very much, and you don't have very many rehearsals, because rehearsals cost money and things like that.
Sure.
So everything's done on a crunch time basis until the show gets going, then you're in a routine. For the music director, it starts anywhere from 3 to 6 months prior.
Wow. Okay.
So first, if you don't know the score, then you better learn it before auditions, just to know what you're looking for in a voice. And then after auditions, you have a cast set. Then it's 3 rehearsals a week, sometimes 4, with the singers and the piano. And then so Teresa Reed is here. I've worked with her so many times. It's I think we work well together, and we kind of split. She's yelling out directions to the singers while we're rehearsing, and no, you got to go over this way, this way. But it's all great. I mean, it's all. I couldn't ask for a better collaborator to work with than Teresa. It's been lovely. Community theater is really, really fun because you got people there who want to be there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Instead of, oh God, I got to do this again. So they're really excited, and it's 3 months goes by of rehearsals, and then it's done in 2 weeks,
Yeah,
2 weekends.
Yeah.
And it's so sad at the end, you know.
Yeah. It is.
We're
It's
just
kind
getting going, you know.
Yeah.
We're getting into
You're
a
hitting your
groove.
stride.
Yeah. So, of course, I think you alluded to that we did Fiddler
On the
last
roof.
year, a year ago, 2023.
22, 23?
Yeah, it's 24 now. So yeah, it's May of.
Oh, retirement, you know?
Yeah. And then that was a really wonderful production, I thought. All around, the cast was fantastic. The pit orchestra was really top notch. And then, of course, Teresa's direction and stage lighting and all that stuff. There's so much that goes,
Oh,
you know. And I try to stay away from that. I appreciate it, but, you know, set building.
Yeah.
God.
Costuming.
Costuming.
Yeah, lighting. Yeah.
Just everything. So I try to stay in my lane and you know, and give everybody else the benefit of the doubt, you know.
But you know, that musical in particular, it's right there in the title, Fiddler on the Roof. The music is like a character.
It is, yeah. It's integral to the story, I think, and it just gives you that feeling of, you know, at the turn of the century there, and
And the lives of the
lives of
community.
the Hebrew Jewish people there. You know, I can't confirm it, but I believe it took place in a town, what we call now Ukraine, which was part of the Soviet, or the Russian Empire at that time, before the Soviets took over. So it was timely that we did it too, I think, to bring attention to the Ukrainian cause and everything like that. But my other favorite experience with Flott was when we did Les Mis.
Oh, sure.
I don't know how many years ago. That was a while back too, but 10 already? Gosh. But that, I thought we hit it out of the park there with that one.
Such a stirring.
But it about killed me. It's a 3-hour show, and it's a lot of stick work and a lot of cueing, and then we got across left stage, right stage. So I was exhausted.
Oh, I'll bet. I'll bet.
But
Excuse me, we didn't hear what show you were talking about back here.
Les Mis.
Mis.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, just say speak up. I'm very soft spoken.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, so let's I want to touch base. About this time, every time we do this, I sort of ask people to look in their crystal balls or express their hopes. And, you know, I'm a big fan of classical music, and I think I've heard a number of times, oh, it's on the skids, or it's the death of classical music, or it's the death of opera, or it's the death of the musical. And somehow it perseveres, but it's always, I mean, you just underscored how demanding, for example, musical theater is, and opera is just as much. And so you often worry. So being a youth orchestra conductor, do you have any insights? I mean, are these kids responding to the music? Are you hopeful about the future of classical music?
Well, there's every year there's one or two that go on to pursue music as a career, or at least in college. But I think those numbers were a little bit higher years ago, and it's surely the program was, there were more kids involved in the 90s, so-called glory years of music in Fairbanks. The high schools were producing wonderful students. The university had a great music department program. And then slowly over the years, especially the last 10 years, you know, budgets have been shrinking. Money has been not allocated to the arts as much as it used to be. So I'm a little worried. You know, COVID didn't do us any favors. Mm-hmm. But it seems like, at least at the high school level, things are making a comeback, which is good. But unfortunately, it's the community support. You know, I have friends here, and they all love music and support the events, but not so much that the community at large is doing that anymore. Mm. So I do worry.
Yeah.
And I'm very hesitant on who I recommend if they ask me, should I be a music major? I'll be honest with them, it's a rough road. It's hard to be really good and successful. You have to really love it, and you have to be willing to put up with a lot of baloney along the way.
Yeah. Well, more personally,
to make a living at it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think but you demonstrated, you and Candy, that you can, and you can, yeah, it can be done. So I think that there's always that model. But more personally, I was charmed to hear that you're looking at Sibelius and studying the score for...
Yeah, I haven't actually studied the score yet, but I've gotten into Sibelius this last year, and especially his Fifth Symphony, which is, I don't know where I've been, why I didn't know it, but from the very first notes, I mean, you're transported into this Finland, this world of sound that I find very familiar being in Alaska. So I think it has something to do with the latitude and the midnight sun and this and that, and the same kind of animals that we have, the moose, cranes, you know, all those kind of things, the bird migrations. And it's such a unique sound world that Sibelius creates. You know, I'd played his first, second symphony in Finlandia and the violin concerto, but this Symphony Number 5. I recommend it to anybody and everybody. It's not like your normal symphony, but it's a trip.
Yeah.
It's a journey
Well, you know, I
that
think
you can
that's
explore.
the great thing about classical music. It's such a broad, long river.
It
that
is.
You can step into it in so many places that you never did before.
And I'll tell you, you'll never get through everything.
No, yeah.
It's impossible in our day and age. I mean, you can if that's all you did from the time you woke up
I'm
to
just
the...
hoping when they implant the chip there that there'll be a lot of space for those
Yeah.
scores. Well, as I warned you, I open it up to questions from the audience about this time every evening. Does anyone have a question for George? You planted her here, right? Yeah.
Okay, so you worked so many years with the youth orchestra.
Yes.
And you haven't talked about that. That's a great thing. But so I'm curious. So you got a bunch of kids, and obviously they're not all super good musicians. How do you cope with the sound of beginning musicians when you have such good ears?
Well,
I don't know how you do that. That's just.
first of all, I got to work with the oldest group in the youth orchestra. So
Yeah, and they always sounded good.
we have a wonderful string program that's been here for at least 40 years, I think. The Suzuki program with Gail Johansson and, of course, Kathy Butler Hopkins before she retired and left the state. They put together a wonderful program, and there's so many great Suzuki teachers, students of Gail's and Kathy's that carry on that tradition. And they have high standards, and that's the thing. It's not just for fun, which, you know, everybody nowadays, you know, play music and have fun, but they don't realize it takes work, it takes practice. And we're dealing with that with our grandson. He loves music, but he doesn't like to practice. But he came up to the music academy, the summer camp, you know. And so I think he got a good idea, and I think he will start practicing more seriously. And to answer your question a little bit more, it's a lot of repetition. No, it's not like that. It's like this. Da, 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 you know. So you have to teach them. And for the most part, they're very absorbent, eager to learn. And when they hear, when everybody plays together, I think that's the moment. He's not crazy. He's got some ideas, and if we do our part, we can all sound really good, you know. So.
Have you seen that flash, that light bulb go off on some of your students?
I think so. I think so, yeah. I mean, you definitely see a difference in attitude from the beginning of the semester to the final concert. First, they're all nervous, you know,
Sure.
A lot of them. And then they're beaming at the end of the performance and proud. They did something,
Yeah,
so feeling of accomplishment.
that's great. Any other questions? Mary?
I wondered, when you were in Germany, was that after the wall fell, so you were able to go through both Western and Eastern?
So when you were in Germany, was it after the war? I'm
We-
doing this for the video because, of course.
Oh, yeah. We were there prior to the wall coming down. We were there in November of '83 through November of '85. Yeah. But we did have a band in Berlin. I wasn't in it, but yeah, I think travel to the Eastern Bloc at that time was not very feasible, but that's okay. We got to see plenty.
Yes,
George, you
Ron.
recommended the relationship between a teacher who had high standards as sort of an inspiration for a lot of students. But when you're working with symphony, youth symphony, how much of that is kids working with each other? Because I found that you oftentimes learn more from peers than you do from other sources. Is that a factor?
So let me just repeat that question just to say, Ron asked about peer relationship between the kids sometimes learning as much as maybe a mentor.
Yeah, definitely. Kids know who sounds great and who sounds okay. And they do listen to that. And part of my job is to praise the great players and encourage the so-so players. You can do this too, you know. You just have to put the work in. But I believe high standards is a necessity in everything in life.
Kind of a simple question. We've always heard about the Marine Band, the Army Band, the Navy Band, the orchestra. Is there an Army orchestra?
Is there an armed service orchestra, an army orchestra?
There is and there are, but they're only in DC, and they do special things. So they don't have like a weekly concert series or anything like that, like professional orchestras. But they do gigs for visiting foreign dignitaries and things like that. So.
Well, I know there's a special cake out there in your honor,
Oh,
George. So
cake.
a warm thank you for George Rydlinski. How was it? Oh, you bet. I was really looking forward to it.